Hi, everyone. Today's book is by the same author, Jim Murphy, as Dinosaur for a Day that I had read before. It is called The Last Dinosaur. Before I begin the story, I want to read to you a little bit about what scientists think happened to the dinosaurs. The dinosaurs disappear. For over 140 million years, dinosaurs ruled the world. They lived everywhere, in the forests, near swamps and rivers, and on the open plain. So many dinosaurs were around that other types of animals found it hard to exist. For instance, only very small mammals could survive around the dinosaurs, and they spent their lives hiding under bushes or in tall trees. Remember, the dinosaurs would eat the other animals. Then suddenly the dinosaurs began to die off, and one kind after another disappeared forever. Why did this happen? Some scientists who study dinosaurs believe they were infected by a deadly disease. Others think a giant comet struck the Earth, sending up a large cloud of dust that blocked the sun. This would have caused the temperature on Earth to drop so it would get very, very cold, and dinosaurs would not have been able to find food or survive the cold weather. Probably a variety of reasons having to do with climate, food sources, and sickness ate away at dinosaur populations over a long period of time. Then something very unusual, like a comet, finished them off. If the case of the great dying remains unclear, the effect isn't. That means the result. Areas that once had many of the creatures soon had only a few. This story will let you see what some of those last dinosaurs might have experienced. It opens at dawn, 65 million years ago, at the very end of the age of the dinosaurs. And I'm sure you all know exactly what kind of dinosaur that is. If you said Triceratops, you're absolutely right. The sun came up slowly, fingers of light poking into and brightening the tangled forest of pine trees. The drone of insects quieted and the tiny mammals scampered to hide. In a clearing, a small Triceratops herd began their day. The female Triceratops blinked several times before moving to get the light out of her eyes. Then she went back to the frond that she ripped from the tree. The frond was tough and spiky, but her sharp-edged beak and rows of teeth chopped the plant into easily swallowed pieces. She was about to tug at another frond when a male Triceratops began stamping his feet in alarm. Dinosaurs stamped their feet, as far as we know, to signal danger to the other dinosaurs. And let's remember that females are the moms or the girls, and males are the boys or the dads. He had been feeding at the base of a tree when his horns became tangled in a mass of grapevines. He shook his head violently to get free. When that didn't work, he backed away, yanking his head from side to side. Still covered with vines, he stopped. His breathing came in short, grunting pants. Suddenly he lowered his head and he charged the tree. He hit it solidly. He backed up and he hit it again. And then he backed up and he hit it again. The fourth hit splintered the tree's base and it leaned over. A few wiggles of his head, and the vine slipped off. He snorted at the vine, challenging it. When it didn't move, he walked around it and he left the clearing. He was the largest Triceratops, and he was the leader of the herd. So the smaller male and female followed him. I think that was pretty smart that he figured out how to get the grapevines off his horns. The three wandered through the forest, always staying near the stream that was their source of water. They did not hurry, and they often stopped to nibble at figs or tender trees. On the second day, they came to a hillside covered with tasty ferns. The spot was cool and quiet, so they stayed the afternoon just browsing. A sudden noise made the female jerk up her head to look and listen. They had not seen another dinosaur in a very long time, but she was still wary. That means she was being very careful. A hungry Tyrannosaurus might have picked up their scent and followed, hoping one of them would stray from the herd. The two males sensed her being nervous and also looked around. A giant dragonfly circled the Triceratops and then flew away. A bird chattered briefly, and then the forest grew still. Was a Tyrannosaurus out there, watching, waiting? Nothing moved, and the noise did not return, but the herd was nervous. They left the hillside and they continued their journey. The next day, the land sloped downward and the stream got wider to become a series of waterfalls, pools, and rapids. The path twisted to follow the water and dipped sharply in places. Despite their great size, the Triceratops walked along the narrow ledges and leaped boulders with an easy grace. That's not easy, being as big as a Triceratops and walking up these mountains. The female Triceratops smelled something. Her sense of sight was not very good, so she turned to face what was causing that strange odor. Wisps of smoke trailed through the trees. The smoke was from a fire started the night before by heat lightning. The female couldn't see the fire or know that it was coming close to them, but the smoke was growing thicker and more unpleasant, so the three animals trotted away. See, now you can see that there's still all three of them. The large Triceratops and then the smaller female and male. All night they moved quickly to stay clear of the smoke. At dawn, the ground got flat and the smell seemed to disappear. The two males stopped, exhausted, and they bent down to drink the cool water. The female continued along the path. Weeks before, the female was getting ready to become a mommy. She was hunting now for a spot to build her nest. The leader stamped his feet and snorted for her to stop, but it did no good. She would not obey until her nest was complete and her eggs were laid. This time, the male dinosaurs followed her. She knew that she was having babies and she wanted to make sure that she had a nest to lay her eggs in. A mile downstream, the forest thinned and the stream emptied into a big swamp. In the past, there used to be Pachycephalosaurus, or the armored Ankylosaurus, browsing in the cattails. Cattails are the plants that grow alongside the water, and they look almost like cattails. I don't know. Oh, here they are. You can see them right here, and they're called cattails. Now there were only the bones of a long dead Anatosaurus half buried in the mud. The female walked the edge of the swamp carefully. The ground was either too wet or too rocky for her nest. On the opposite side of the swamp, she found a warm, sandy area with low growing shrubs. She began digging using the toes of her front and her rear feet to shovel out the sand. The hole she dug was 6 feet across and a foot deep. Remember, a foot is a ruler? So she made it 12 inches deep. When the hole was finished, she laid 15 eggs in it to make a circle. She covered the eggs with sand. The sun would shine down on the sand and make it warm so that the eggs could stay warm. And eventually the baby Triceratops would hatch out of the eggs. The two males were feeding a little distance from the nest. The smaller male got closer to the nest. When the female saw him, she placed herself between him and her eggs and lowered her head as a warning. She put her horns forward and she warned him to stay back. The curious male kept coming, so the female charged him. Only when he backed away did she stop her charge. When the herd had been larger, many females would make nests in the same area. They would then take turns guarding the nests or feeding and sleeping. But the female Triceratops was all alone now. She would not have any help from any other female Triceratops. It would be her job to keep clumsy males and egg-eating creatures away from her eggs. The quick little mammals were especially annoying at night because there were little mammals, little furry mammals at night, like a possum or raccoons, and they would steal her eggs. So she had to really be careful, and she didn't have anybody else to really help her watch her nest. Uh-oh. 2 days later, the smell of smoke returned. It was faint, distant, and yet the three Triceratops grew nervous. The female paced back and forth near her nest. Late in the day, a heavy line of smoke appeared on the other side of the swamp. Flames erupted, reaching into the air. A flock of birds flew overhead, screeching an alarm. Mammals, made bold by their fear, left their hiding places and they ran from the fire. The two males edged away, but the female mommy dinosaur, Triceratops, stayed to guard her eggs, even when the fire was coming. In the smoke and the dark forest shadows, something moved. The shape was big as many of the trees, and it had a massive head. Tyrannosaurus Rex. The giant flesh-eater stepped from the forest, snapping his mouth to show 7-inch long slashing teeth. Instinctively, the two Triceratops rejoined the female, and they made a circle barrier in front of the nest. What Triceratops would do if there was an entire herd is put the children and the females in the middle of the circle, and all the males would make a circle around the females and the babies and put their heads down like this to scare off whatever enemy might be trying to attack them. Instinctively, the two Triceratops made this barrier. The leader lowered his head and stared at its enemy. Neither the Triceratops nor the Tyrannosaurus Rex moved. Looks kind of scary to me. Ordinarily, the Tyrannosaurus would not attack a Triceratops, especially near its nest. but a wall of flames and heat had cut off his exit. Besides, the Tyrannosaurus had not had a large meal in weeks, so he was very hungry. The Tyrannosaurus darted at the herd, skidded to a sudden halt, then began circling warily, watching for a chance to strike. He hissed and he snapped his teeth. At that instant, the largest Triceratops charged, his powerful legs driving him directly into the soft belly of his attacker. With the aid of his long tail and his thick muscled legs, the Tyrannosaurus leaped aside to avoid the sharp horns. He spun and he dove, his mouth wide open, and he sank his teeth into the back of the Triceratops. Then the smaller Triceratops lunged at the giant, but he was an inexperienced fighter. The Tyrannosaurus's teeth closed on its neck, and with a quick, deadly yank, he tore a chunk of flesh from the Triceratops. Now the smaller Triceratops fell, dying. I hope Livy's hanging in there. The other Triceratops tried to charge again, but his right leg was dragging and his movements were slow. Sorry about that, guys. Again, the Tyrannosaurus moved aside easily. Using his tail as a spring, the Tyrannosaurus launched himself for the kill. His teeth sank into the Triceratops while his clawed feet struck him in the stomach. The two rolled, kicking and biting each other. At this moment, the female Triceratops abandoned her eggs and rammed the Tyrannosaurus full in his side. He bellowed painfully, releasing his hold on the male. The female pushed forward with all her strength, pinning the Tyrannosaurus against a tree and driving her horns in deeper. She stepped away, and she watched her enemy ready to charge if he got up. His legs and tail flailed weakly, his breathing became labored, and there was a violent shudder, and their enemy was killed. I guess that mommy Triceratops was very, very brave. Because remember, Triceratops is a plant eater. And the Tyrannosaurus was definitely looking for a meal. During the battle, the fire had spread, leaping and dancing from tree to tree until it reached the edge of the sandy area. Flames rolled through the reeds. The male Triceratops struggled to get up, but his legs bent under him. He crawled a few feet, but he had to stop. He was hurt too badly. A choking wave of smoke surrounded him. The female Triceratops went back to protect her eggs. To one side, a tree crashed to the ground, sending up an explosion of sparks. A bush nearby caught fire. The female charged it, slashing at it blindly with her horns. The roar of the fire became deafening, and the heat and smoke grew painful. Reluctantly, the female moved away from her eggs to find air. She didn't want to leave her eggs, but she had to survive, and she knew if she stayed with the eggs, she would definitely die. She needed to get away from the fire, and she needed to get fresh air. She went only a short distance and turned to go back. The smoke stung her lungs and burned her eyes. She shook her head, but the choking pain would not go away. She backed away some more and lost sight of her nest. Immediately, the tiny mammals pounced on the unguarded nest. Low to the ground, the smoke was not so thick. Digging hastily, they uncovered the eggs and they ate them. Then they scurried from the approaching fire. The female Triceratops hurried through the forest. Several times she stopped to look back toward her eggs. A wall of smoke and flames was all she could see. And finally, she had to just give up. A strange tongue of flames reached out at her, and she broke into a gallop. She crashed through branches and vines and leaped over fallen logs with the fire just behind her. At last she came to a rock ledge overlooking a wide river. The water was dark and deep. Branches and tree roots floated near the banks. The female wanted to find another way out, but she was surrounded by flames. She hesitated a second, and then she jumped into the water. Legs churning frantically, she swam across the river and away from the fire. The river's current caught her, pulling her swiftly along. She struggled to keep her head above the water, to breathe, all the while moving her legs. At last her feet touched the river bottom. Oops. Exhausted, her breathing fast, she hauled herself onto the solid ground. Across from her, the fire had stopped at the river's edge. She was safe. It was then that she noticed the streams of mammals that had also crossed the river to escape the fire. The light grew dim and the air became chilly. The female's breath gave off thin vapor streams. The triceratops shook her head and snorted. She hadn't eaten much in days, and she wanted to find some plants. And maybe somewhere deep in the forest there was another triceratops herd she could join. Slowly, as the sun went down, the female pushed through the bushes to begin her search. So, according to our book, the only dinosaur, the last dinosaur in this book, was a female Triceratops mom who hated to leave her eggs behind but had to escape through the fire. Possibly the fire was caused by a meteor. Maybe, as with our Hypsilophodon, it was caused by lightning. We're not sure. But in this book, the Triceratops defeated the Tyrannosaurus Rex and lived to be the last dinosaur. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed this book. I hope it wasn't too yucky for Lila and for Livy. But remember, it's sad to think about the death of the dinosaurs, but we shouldn't be too sad about their end. They were amazing survivors, occupying every corner of the world and adapting to changing climates and food. While knowing why they died off is important, we can probably learn a great deal more about the Earth and how to exist in it successfully by discussing how the dinosaurs lived day to day. We shouldn't consider the death to the dinosaurs an ending. If anything, we can think of it as a lucky beginning, because with the dinosaurs gone, scientists believe that the small mammals found the world a much safer place. They came out of the bushes, down from their treetop hiding places, and in time their numbers increased and they began to explore the world around them. So the age of the dinosaurs gave way to the age of the mammals, who no longer had to be afraid of being eaten by the carnivore dinosaurs. I will see you guys next week, and we'll talk a lot more about the dinosaurs. Have a good weekend.